Daniel's here. Correctivity in discussion of the war in Ukraine. I'll be joined this evening by one or two guests. This conversation will be a bit experimental because we're both new to this and getting our feet wet. We're not professional media people. We are, however, honest and good people who have important things to say in the interests of our peoples, our European peoples, and any people of goodwill throughout the world. And so we are endeavoring to talk about the situation as it is and work through our our inexperience, and so that we can finally represent some sanity and to the position of well, to defense of our people, let's say, because I don't think that you're supposed to say nationalism. That's what's causing me some hesitancy. I think that's another word that you're not supposed to say. I guess I just have to call nationalism or our people. Genus and species. Species is what I've been calling the the particular nations of Europe, and genus, Europeans in general. Anyway, this platform is very important to note. While we can be critical of non-European peoples, we are not calling for the killing of anybody, let alone genocide. On the contrary, and not even, of course, not even exploitation, and we're not doing anything stupid like we're not denying the Holocaust or trying to redeem Hitler and Nazi Germany. So we're on solid moral ground, and we can explain ourselves. And so even if we are somehow vilified, it's we could take a stand there and really should not be. This is we have a message and a platform that anybody can hear, and any person of goodwill should largely agree with, and that's why we're speaking with fair lack of inhibition on YouTube, able to be quite public. We've got two listeners. I wonder if Mirth Baron, are you here? You can join us if you like. I'll put in the link in the chat. So it might be good for a time just to talk with me, and I didn't mention my guest. I'm here with Per.
Hello.
Hi, Per.
Hello.
Now, Claire Call says the fact that you say you're not calling for genocide is rather telling. How is it telling, Claire? And you're about to get booted for saying such a thing. Why is it telling? Can you unhide secular court? No. Gotta be careful because I'm very inclined to boot you. You've been a bad actor. You're trying to get me in trouble, and I can't let you. Okay. So anyway, let's talk. Per is from Scandinavia. I don't know if he wants to. It's okay if I specify the exact country, but I imagine it is.
Yeah.
Per's from Sweden, and he's a fellow nationalist, and I think we're in large agreement. I don't want to call this my platform. Let's call it this platform because it, get any equation with my ego out of the equation, because it's a logically based platform. It's not a subjective thing. And we've been talking about the situation, about the war, and how so many. Not only are we. Let me speak for myself for now. No, not only have I been shocked by what Putin has done, it would be a compliment to call him an animal, it'd be an insult to animals. But the bigger surprise is how many so-called white nationalists or people of that who purport to be acting in the interests of European peoples are defending Putin's actions. Now, there's another side, of course, which is the neocon, Victoria Nuland, Robert Kagan side, which appears is apparently a function of Operation Clean Break, wherein Zelensky has been installed as the president by oligarchs of a kosher brand. And for me, anyway, I think anybody who's honest in their appraisal of the situation, what I've been saying for the past few podcasts is that his calling for Ukrainians to fight against the Russian army at this point, or to begin with even, is irresponsible and not the way someone would talk if they were genuinely aligned with Ukrainian interests, with European interests, and their species. Because he's not Ukrainian. However, not fighting directly against Putin isn't to give Putin any excuses. There's no excuse for what Putin's doing. And he has kosher backing on his side as well. But there's no excuse for what he's doing. And there's no excuse for Zelensky calling for his own people to fight to the death and allowing his people to be killed, his their cities and houses and apartments and to be destroyed, let alone uh, to try to drag the rest of the nations into this war. I've been modeling my argument on my experience in Belarus and having spent quite a bit of time there and with the people functioning under the Russian stooge regime of Lukashenko, and it's very bad in some ways, no doubt. As I've said, Lukashenko has murdered at least 10 and maybe up to 25 political opponents. He stages elections every so often. They're completely fake. And anybody who protests, I've met in person people who've been beaten for hours protesting, or sets up alternative media. They can be beaten as well and face jail time. And the Belarusian jails are just brutal. You can see the trauma in these people when they come out. I shouldn't laugh. It's not funny. They, Russian language and this retro Soviet culture and propaganda, controlled media. Belarusian language is kind of being phased out. They're sort of blending away that culture the way Putin would blend away Ukrainian culture and difference if he could. It's bad, but the fact is, Belarus is still close to 90% Belarusian genetically. They're different from Russians, and they're surviving. And it's not even altogether unpleasant there. The lived life, restaurants, bars, nice parks, family life, what have you. And therefore, to have not fought and to not fight ongoingly against Putin, and the situation being what it is, of course, it'd be best if it would have been avoided to begin with. But I think, to allow Putin to install a puppet for now and overcome it in the long run is the best strategy to advocate. What do you think, Bert?
Yeah, I would agree. Absolutely. Because very unnecessary war, really.
Definitely.
As I said. So, and I don't think the killings of Ukrainians is worth this war. And yeah, I just think if he has the best interest of the Ukrainian people, he should just, Ukraine to be neutral and to give up this eastern part of the land, Donbass and so on. And I mean, it's a majority Russian-speaking people, and I mean, it shouldn't be that big of a loss.
Right, I agree.
So, and also, they have, as I understand it, the only Muslim population there in the East. So, I mean, is it? I don't think it's a big loss.
If Putin would be satisfied with that, and
we don't know that, so yeah, I don't.
If he would be satisfied with that, it's bad. I mean, it's not fair. This was a part of Ukraine, and it's the it's been the industrial heartland, but and it's where the coal resources are. But in my reading of the situation, it's actually an economic liability. Um, so they'd probably be better off without it. Now, apparently, part of the reason why Russia wants it is because that's where they manufacture integral parts for their military apparatus, certain kinds of steels and so on. Um, but yeah, if that's, I mean, if I was brokering if I was trying to negotiate the peace, and Putin could somehow save face by taking those two regions along with Crimea already, which he probably shouldn't have, then so be it. Because I don't think that the Ukrainians and the Russians as people hate each other. I really don't. I think this is largely a function of corrupt elites. But we were talking about, and well, there's been a good argument. There's been a good argument that if Ukrainians really wanted to kill Russians, they wouldn't need to go to Donbass, because that's been one of the major claims on behalf of the Russians, that they're just they're defending themselves against the neo-Nazis who are committing these atrocities in the Donbass, killing civilians and so on. But a good argument is that they don't have to go to Donbass to kill Ukrainians, and in fact checking the civilian casualties, it seems that it's a small percentage of the 14,000 some civilian casualties since 2014. Most of them have been military, like seems like over 95%, and they're only attacking where Russian military is, and they're not attacking Russia. It's been Ukrainian land. Now, I'm not saying that it's advisable that they fight and that they do this, but it's not exactly as if Putin and Russia's presence there is entirely innocent.
Yeah, and I also think it's when you look at it, quite double standard from Russia, because they say they are protecting this Donbass because they want to have their own republican country, and but what's the other country, the other people there in Russia that wanted independence, but
The Chechens?
yeah, exactly, they wanted to have their own own land and own, but as I understand, Russia didn't allow them. So why would they? Why is it so important to protect these Russians in eastern Ukraine and have them their independence, but not other people that don't want to leave Russia? So I think that's
Even worse. If he wants to protect these people, why doesn't he send his huge military just into this area and leave it at that? I think if he did that, probably the world probably wouldn't even say anything. It's okay. There you go, Putin. You got your two provinces. Now shut up. But he doesn't do that. I mean, in order to quote defend these two provinces. He's got to destroy all of Ukraine and take over all of Ukraine. A lot of sense that makes. The guy's crazy.
Yeah, I think his defense was that he thought that this was going to be not a war, but a special operation in Ukraine, in Kiev, to take out the government there. And it will be quick and not a war, and capture the president and force him to stop bombing Donbass and so on. But I don't know.
Well, I suppose that he they should have humored him and allowed him to do that if that's what he was going to do, rather than try to fight him tooth and nail.
Yeah.
It's worrying now that the Republicans are even talking about granting Zelensky's call for a no-fly zone, which almost certainly means getting NATO involved and would could quite possibly lead to a world war.
Do you think that could be his plan, or there's some agenda behind it?
I don't think. Yeah, I don't think that. Let's call them they quite operate
Yeah.
exactly necessarily with plans. I think that it functions more on an intuitive level. They just don't care. I mean, you hear the way I heard Halsey English quote, that's his name, on Cato Godfrey's show, saying he doesn't care if Putin nukes Ukraine off the face of the earth. He said that. They're not. That's the thing. They're not European peoples. They don't really care. And to some extent, I think that the Zionists don't care either, because these are, in a sense, diaspora. They're almost like traitors, so they can get killed too.
Yeah. Well, I think it's interesting how the Ukrainian president is a Zionist. He's one of those kosher people,
Yeah.
and a lot of the white nationalists in Europe and United States, they point this out, that he's NATO, and he's anti-European and all this, and I think that's true. But
Who
on
was
the,
that?
on the other hand, it's the same kind of.
Zelensky. Do they say that Zelensky is anti-European?
Yeah, I mean, white nationalists say that is, working is a.
Well, I don't know if he's. I think he just doesn't. I think he really doesn't care. Is the bottom line that ultimately what that kind of perspective leads to is the Mearsheimer or Timothy Snyder or Stephen Kotkin position, which is liberalization and ever more liberalization of our borders with quote democracy. Which is a red caping of democracy. That is to say, democracy, limited democracy, which is limited to voting or input from people amidst the nation, or natives amidst the nation, who are not allowed to vote to open the borders, but are voting to correct the system in an ongoing way. That's proper, but that's exactly right. If the franchise of voting is limited to responsible people who understand enough about life and the civics of the nation and the interests of the nation and care about it. But it's been red caped such that democracy is taken to mean everybody should have the vote, and where and not just everybody, but even non-natives. In the case of the United States, they'll bring in immigrants so they can have new voters for the Democratic Party, or they will, just try to register just everybody, no matter how incompetent and ignorant they are. Uh, and this is the idea of democracy and uh, pragmatic correction that they're and that's how they pervert it. In the case of Britain, it would be Tony Blair calling in for immigrations to put an end to the Tories and have the Labour Party in there forever, just browning away England. But this is so-called democracy, right? So they're perverting the idea of democracy. Um, but yeah, I mean well, with these right wingers, what they're doing is that they're trying to blame everything on the kosher folks, when in fact they're a small minority, and they depend upon um, they depend upon right wingers and liberals and neoliberals who will take the payoff and sell out our people, who will, or in the case of liberals, would say the incentive is license and licentiousness to conduct themselves in whatever way to rupture our borders and bounds. Um, so this is what someone like David Duke will never call attention to, and these right and they'll try to make everything about the kosher folk.
Yeah, but why don't they take a look at Russia? And I mean, the kosher folk is also having a big influence in Russia, to my understanding,
Absolutely,
and
absolutely.
that's the double standard I see, that someone like David Duke is talking about these people, these kosher people running Ukraine, and I believe it's true, but they also have a big influence in Russia and on Putin. I mean,
Yes.
uh,
Well, what we
uh,
said before is that um, so 80% of the oligarchs in Russia are kosher, and they're very, of course, have their influence there, including over Putin. And there's Shabbat Lubavitch, and Putin has his agreements and his arrangements with Israel. So, and but he's had help and upbringing from very early ages, uh, right? That's from the kosher folks, and help into the presidency. I think for Abramovich and another guy. It's not only, of course, it's not only kosher folks, but it's one or the other. It's either the kosher folks who are organized as a group, or right wingers and liberals who don't care, or a very narrow sense of accountability, if you can call it accountability at all, uh, are quite willing to sell out their people. And well, this war is a perfect example of uh, right wingers being maneuvered into destruction. And that's not to absolve them of their responsibility at all in this. Putin is is more responsible than anybody for what's happening, for sure. And in this case, he is a right winger.
Yeah, do you think that many of the alternative medias and even white nationalist groups in Europe and United States, do you think they are actually paid by Russia government? And I mean,
Yes.
I have heard like Clinton and others speaking about that, and I thought like this, I thought it was lies, but I'm not so sure anymore when I hear people
No,
talking now.
I think some of them are naive, and some of them are probably outright agents. But yeah, I mean, a lot of them are drinking the Kool Aid, and they have been for years. They've been just like, oh, RussiaGate. It couldn't possibly be that uh, Russia was involved in this thing, no matter how plain it was. I mean, Paul Manafort, right, was Trump's original campaign advisor, and he was in turn a campaign advisor to was it Yanukovych, the Russian stooge. Uh, yeah, Yanukovych.
Mm.
So I mean, Trump was definitely somehow involved or favored uh, by by Russia, and so he was definitely getting funding in the helps of bailing out his failed business and interests and whatnot. And people like Rams Paul and others are always, oh, Russia Gate, like there was nothing to it. There was something to it. Um, and and then you have, and then it goes right down the line to someone like Nick Fuentes. What's he doing? He's saying all this
Yeah,
crazy stuff. And Nick Fuentes and David Duke, even and Sam Dixon. Like uh, what's he doing? Um, I understand. We understand. People being so disillusioned.
yeah,
America could be so horrible that you know you almost don't care. It's like, yeah, root for the any opposition, but that's to not understand the situation overall. To do that,
yeah. Guess it's the same here in Sweden. I mean, Swedish nationalists they look at Sweden and see this all this immigration, and they see that this LGBTQ, all this political correctness and how they're destroying Sweden, and maybe they look at a country like Belarus and see, okay, Russia and Belarus, it's majority white, it's conservative, it's pro-family, it's anti-LGBTQ, maybe anti-abortion, and so on and so on. And they see like, well, if yeah, if you've got two options, stay at it as it is now with, or have
well,
Russia.
well,
Mm,
well, the more
should
clear
be.
example, the more stark example is Russia itself. But I've been saying that yeah, Lukashenko, if it would be I understand the trauma and the despair of those in Sweden who care for Sweden, that they
Yeah,
would and rather than things continuing to go this way in the dissolution and destruction of the native Swedish people and their species, yes, in fact, it would be better to play along and to allow Putin to install a Lukashenko-like puppet in Sweden, and if and I don't, and this is a big if because I don't think that he would. Um, I think that he would just In Belarus, you already have a situation where it's 90% Belarusian population. So I don't think that he would alter the situation. So you'd just be trapped in there in a fishbowl, and with your death. So it might not work in Sweden, but it would work in Ukraine, where if you installed a puppet, it would be draconian and cruel and oppressive, but you would at least survive intact as a people for a time, and then you'd be in position to fight the long fight and retake the leadership of the nation in genuine Ukrainian interests. So, like I said, I don't know if that would quite work in Sweden, because I don't think that Putin exactly. I think he cares too much about Swedes.
No,
And
and I believe that many nationalists have this fantasy dream about Putin, that he would be like a white nationalist that comes to save the West from the corruption and the immigration and all that. But if you take a look at Russia, I mean, it's not a Russian ethno-state. It's a multicultural and racial country. I don't think he's a really he might call himself a patriot or something like that, but it's not for a white or a Russian ethno-state. I mean,
how about this?
I-
How about
yeah,
this declaration to the United Nations? This proposal to the United Nations that Putin made, where uh, where discrimination should be prohibited by law. Uh, di- Discrimination should be declared offenses punishable by law. Um, Express concern about the use of internet to propagate racism, racial hatred, xenophobia, racial discrimination, relational intolerance, related intolerance in this regard. Calls upon states, parties, and covenant to implement fully Articles 19 and 20 thereof, which guarantee the right and freedom of expression and outline uh, grounds on which the exercise of the right can be legitimately restricted. In other words, they're calling defense of your people racism and prohibiting that. So he's proposing uh, uh, the ultimate liberal mechanism and ultimate destruction of your people. He's not in the interests of European peoples.
yeah, right. And you're not supposed to be allowed to criticize the kosher people there in Russia, or
And that too, right?
yeah,
I forgot. There's a stipulation of that in the same document. Uh,
yeah,
Anti-Semitism is prohibited. Where is it? Let me see if I can find that.
yeah. Also, I have heard people talking about in Russia how he, Russian nationalist in Yale, in Russia, and so on, for speaking. So not, I think it's not that he puts the gays in prison or something like that. It's also
It's really
yeah,
obnoxious how
yeah,
what a big deal people make about uh, what they call. I hate this term global homo, and they make such a big
yeah.
deal out of it. It's like
Not that,
I don't even see gays anywhere. Who care? I mean, it's not that I don't care. It's just that it's like such a relatively small issue, and they say
yeah,
you want to side with Putin because he made some law against gay parades or something. It's ridiculous.
yeah, it is. Uh, not that not that I'm defending gay parade. I want to get rid of that myself. But
Well,
I
yeah,
I don't
yeah.
have anything against gay people. Uh, like that. But yeah, it's ridiculous. Um, he's some kind of conservative, maybe, but he's not nationalist. And as I understand it, I mean, Stalin, the dictator
Well,
coming.
I do want to say, because we are on YouTube, and because also honestly, I don't know if I would care all that I care all that much about um gay parades, provided they're discreet. There's none where I am, but that's a really sensitive issue on YouTube. So I don't want to.
Yeah,
I don't want to come across too conservatively, especially because my position is that, like, as long as they're not pedophiles, they're discreet, they go to their
yeah,
bars. I'm not going to. I have no interest in persecuting them.
no, I agree.
I think that it's a naturally occurring phenomenon in a very small percentage of the population, and that it's here. It exists because it somehow has survival value in the grand scheme of things, the grand ecology. Um, Biology is it's sort of evolved and based on a sense of optimality, and there's an optimal balance of uh, gender and its expressions that occurs within a kind of homeostasis, and uh, so there's going to be these people are in a more gray and mixed zone apparently. Anyway, that's all I would say. I the these right wingers are too reactionary on that issue, and
Yeah, but I mean, also Stalin, he was against homosexuals, and he was also for the Orthodox Church, and so on. I mean,
oh yeah,
yeah. So I mean, Putin, he's not like this conservative nationalist standing up for the Russian people or white race or whatever. I mean, I think he's more like Stalin or so. What I mean,
now he is, yeah.
yeah,
And the Orthodox Church, I mean, this is like, I mean, it's Christianity. It's just another form of Christianity when you come right down to it. So sooner or later, you're going to have people reading the text for themselves and declaring themselves Martin Luther and faithful to these misdirecting tangles, you know, which have no explicit concern for your people at all. You're supposed to be accountable to Jesus in the sky and the life hereafter, not your lived life, not your forebears. That's why I think the Orthodox Church was foremost in doing away with our ancestral holidays that you have even still some vestige of in Sweden. The Ancestor Reverence Day around November 1st, is it? Uh, and they replaced that with All Saints Day, and
yeah. In Sweden, they try to replace midsummer and other holidays, but it was so popular in the population, so they couldn't replace them. They just tried to make them Christian holidays, saints and so on, but it didn't work. So it still have those
good.
traditional days here, traditions. Yeah,
And you would think that the people who are so big on anthropology and cultural enrichment would appreciate that. And that
yeah,
I heard one. I can't name her name, but she's of a famous family. Said, "Oh, and it's all these ideas are borrowed from somewhere else." Ah, never mind. it's Swedish, and it's a great tradition.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, so yeah, so the Orthodox nationalist has been making these arguments about is an Orthodox priest, and it's going to save the world against global homo and all that nonsense. And how Putin is just acting in defense because Victoria Nuland's got her biolabs there, and oh, they want to, in a creeping way, they want to set up NATO. Uh, uh, really, and then he's talking about the Azov battalions attacking the Donbass. Now, I thought this guy was supposed to care about Ukrainian people. How is Putin justified in what he's doing? He's not. Like I said, the situation in the Donbass. Well, Putin could either put all his troops there and prevent any more killings from happening, and take his case for whatever war crimes that he thinks have been committed to the perpetrators of the Azov battalion or whomever, or he could just withdraw the Russian people from the Donbass. Uh, but to go to war on all of Ukraine, and I mean, even if it's true that there are biolabs in Ukraine, even if they had nukes, I mean, Ukraine and NATO would be crazy to. And what reason would they have to deploy them against Russia? Even if they did, they would just get clobbered in return. So this is nonsense. This is no excuse.
Yeah, and I think it's like double standard again. Why should Russia be allowed to have nuclear weapons near their neighbors, their other European countries, but no other European country can have nuclear weapon? What's I mean,
And furthermore, they're pretty close anyway. I mean, if you have, I mean, I don't think it would take that long for nukes to. I mean, how much of an advantage is it to come from Ukraine as opposed to coming from Poland or France or
yeah,
Estonia?
yeah, and then you can argue when he has won the war against Ukraine, and Poland might also have nuclear weapon now. I must take them, and now Sweden is going to NATO now. I must make there maybe no end to the. We can just blame it on that, and then, for imperialism, I guess.
He's crazy. I mean, in a very deep way, if it really was his personal motive, the creeping liberalism of the West. I mean, that is happening in Ukraine. It's a slow creep, but if that was strictly his concern, that's his best argument, and obviously, the best response doesn't call for this sort of action, this war.
No, and the people in Ukraine is not going to like Putin. I mean, if he wanted them to like him, and he would have defended them by, defended their country, the culture against,
Against the liberalization. Yes,
yeah,
definitely.
and help them in friendly ways. But now
He would work with them.
yeah, but now they are enemies, and I think Ukrainian must think, oh, Putin is evil, so it's better to
And
be.
because he is evil in this,
Yeah,
and not and the thing, yeah, I mean, exactly. I mean, when you hear Coach Red Pill saying, "Oh, Putin's and Russia's going to win the war," well, in what sense are they going to win the war? Or it's ridiculous. they're going to make the Ukrainians hate them forever, and make them
Yeah,
more determined. Well, and that this is the you know the only silver lining to this horror is that they'll make the more fervent ethno nationalists, and before the world, they're showing. It's very moving how people are, whether they realize it or not, they're supporting ethno nationalism as they should, like supporting a species of wildlife that you don't want to go extinct.
yeah,
Why would we want the Ukrainian people to go extinct as a species? We want them to flourish.
yeah,
Uh, so yeah, it's just gonna. And this is also an argument why I say let him put in his puppet, because they're people are gonna like kind of not take it seriously and treat it with great derision, and uh, be in position, especially now with all this abuse, to eventually move that puppet out and get in a genuine, as in not Zelensky, but a genuine Ukrainian leader.
yeah. Yeah,
So, so we're talking about, and then there's Abby Martin is at the other extreme of from the people who blame the kosher folks for everybody. She just blames America's right wingers strictly for everything. The war machine, and I believe in being critical of the war machine. But uh, when you take out people like Victoria Nuland and Blinken, and Victoria Nuland's husband Robert Kagan, who was one of the authors of Operation Clean Break. Uh, you take out, what is this oligarch that put Zelensky into into office? The guy who owned the media corporation there, and Zelensky. It, you don't take his background and its interests into account. Uh, it's you're obviously not dealing honestly with the situation. That's why our platform is so important, because uh, in distinguishing ourselves from Nazism, from the nonsense that goes along with it, the scientism, the Holocaust denial, uh, the calls for uh, killing and genocide, and the calls of the claims of superiority that would supposedly justify exploitation of other peoples. We're with the innocence of putting that stuff aside and
yeah,
asserting unequivocally that we're not that. We should anyway be able to be critical of the kosher folks where they're out of line, and it's important that we do that, because if we don't, then only the Nazis are going to be saying. Then the Nazis are going to be saying, "Oh, see, we're the only ones who take that issue seriously," and we can't let that happen, and we can't let them uh, misrepresent really white nationalism, because
yeah,
that's not a white nationalist position. It's an imperialist supremacist position, and it's a disaster. It's been a disaster, and it will continue to be a disaster. Um,
yeah. Very true.
I wonder if Mirth Baron, are you here? I'll put the link in if anybody if let's see if you in the chat. So it's very important, and that This platform, though, has been beleaguered by true believing Nazis, those who want to associate, and perhaps disingenuous people who are operatives for some alphabet agency who want to associate this platform with Nazism. And I've had as much trouble with right wingers across the board. Christians too have been a big problem. Um, at least in doing their level best to mute my voice. And then you have liberals, of course, which I guess is where I would say Keith Preston is coming from. He always seems to be trying to play along with the Cato Gottfried perspective, which is where this whole notion of the problem nowadays is the left and this characterology, this great demon of the left who doesn't deal with reality. He's exponent of global homo. He doesn't deal with nature. He doesn't care for truth. He's only about narrative. What they're talking about is Red Cape's misrepresentation of what are, in essence, in concept, good, important postmodern ideas that begin to take form with Heidegger and his students. And I don't know, it's disappointing that people are going along with it, but as you were suggesting before, a lot of money and popularity goes along with it. It's being encouraged and allowed for. The alt-right was an expression of that, and now the so-called dissident right. They want you. Our enemies want us to identify as right wingers for a reason, and they want us to characterize, go along with this characterology of the left as the enemy for a reason. Because beneath the depth grammar, that is to say, what holds up consistently, cross-contextually, with this term, the left, is a sense of unionization, which can be applied to, which is applied to groups of people, and not necessarily workers of a particular industry. It can be applied to nations as well, and the natives of the nation. And this would be the way to organize, of course, this concept. This simple concept is the way one organizes against exploitative elites, which of course we're up against, and keeps in line, keeps accountable otherwise rogue group members who want to betray group interests. If you're talking about people on a lower rank and file level, and that would go back to Plato's notion of how it is that you take on the despot, the tyrant. How do you counter the argument of might makes right? Well, when a tyrant or a narrow group of people are lording themselves over the population, then you organize as a bigger group, and then you become more powerful. than the tyrant or the small group of people. And if people will observe, I'm confident to say that this notion of unionization is beneath the concept of the left, and this is what we need to do in order to protect ourselves, to organize ourselves. And the kosher folks have been adept in their own organization and self-maintenance and disrupting ours. That's why they don't want us to identify with the left. They want us to, in fact, see the left as the enemy, as if there can be no left ethno-nationalism, which of course there can be. I don't know who Ye is. We'll see in a second. Which of course there can be. They've wanted us for years to identify as right wing. They call any sort of European nationalist identity right wing, and they do that for a reason. Because again, going back to the depth grammar, it corresponds with a reaction against the sophistry, the abuse within the social world, where you want to affix to an unshakable truth and objective reality. And the problem is that goes beyond, that tends to narrow accountability. The further you move towards this quest for pure warrant, for to be able to say that's just the way it is, and you can't argue against it, you limit accountability, and your position becomes more rigid and susceptible to the kind of maneuvering that we're experiencing, or infiltration, on the other hand. Christianity would be a classic example where it's so pure that, anybody can become one, right?
Yeah.
And on the other hand, it's like this right-wing reaction can go in the other direction, which is most of what Hitler was doing, into the laws of nature, might makes right, which again is below social interaction and the correctivity there, the accountability there. They just say, well, this is the way it is in nature, and therefore humans are no different, which would be to violate the wisdom, that the European wisdom that goes back to Aristotle even. So they want to encourage the right-wing identity, because it tends to, right-wing or liberal identity, liberal first, but right-wing if nothing else, it tends to correspond with objectivism and and quests for narrow warrant beyond nature or within nature. Either way, in this Cartesian divide, apart from the correctivity of our relative interests, of our relative group interests, the delimitation of our group. The delimitation of our group is it's a non-Cartesian move because it calls upon an arbitrary decision that this is where you draw the line. It doesn't say you can't argue against that line, but it says this is warrantably assertable as the delimitation of our group. And when you have that delimitation, then you have the capacity for socialization. Whereas you lose social accountability and socialization when you try for too pure a warrant, and you begin to bleed into a universality of maturity, which is, of course, the situation where we're in, largely the kind of destructive forces that we're in. If I'm not making sense to people, I make sense to myself, so I'll be repeating these things enough so until people do understand. But again, that this is where the likes of Mearsheimer, Kotkin, and Timothy Snyder, would take us. That's the direction that they would head us into if we're not careful in our response to Putin and Zelensky. Who's this Ye guy? Shall I let him on for a second?
Yeah, sure.
Hi.
Can
Who
you
are you?
recite the words, fuck the police?
Oh, it's Judas Flychai,
What's that?
the Jewish guy.
Okay. Kosher guy.
Kosher guy. He's looking very cool, like a mafioso there. Yeah. Anyway, so I call this platform Left Ethno National for a reason, to sort out the right wingers, those who would identify with, who think that Hitler should be redeemed. They think that his program had the answers. Who who think that Christianity is a religion that we should embrace, that it's in our interests. Speaking for myself, I'm satisfied that it's not, that it's an affectation, that it's a false opposition. And I'm on record as having said that since 2013, well before Adam Green. It's a red cape of our moral order, very destructive. That it's not liberalism. That this is one of the confusions. Oh, I know what I wanted to say before. When talking about red caping of the left and the concept of unionization and organization, Marx, of course, was making the union about the workers of the world uniting, not of the ethno nation, but of the world, uniting against the bourgeois who would be complicit with the with the elitists who would be manipulating the mechanisms of the state, and that the proletariat union would take over, and the state would wither away. Well, obviously, this is a weapon against ethno-nationalism, and as is its later form, the cultural Marxism, the Frankfurt School, which is a unionization of non-white groups. So it's blacks, feminists, anybody, basically anybody, including whites who are willing to be anti-white, in coalition against the would-be union of ethno-nationalism. Now, if there was, and that's conservative, of course, so that's not liberal. A union, by definition, is conservative of what's in. You're conserving group members and their interests and culture and patterns, and liberalism would open bounds and boundaries. So when you listen to the political cesspool and James Edwards and Keith Alexander, they don't necessarily understand that this is an oxymoron when they flip-flop, that they're undergoing an oxymoron when they flip-flop from sentence to sentence between liberals and left, because the left, in essence, is the opposite of liberalism, as based on unionization. Now, it becomes liberal for us when it's other people, whether it's conventional Marxists or cultural Marxists, trying to open our borders and boundaries, which they are trying to do, yes. Then they're trying to liberalize our borders, but this is not a liberalizing thing. The unionizations and the coalitions are conservative concepts, and which should be deployed in the interests of European peoples. It's a non-supremacist idea. It's an anti-supremacist idea. And it doesn't necessarily mean, it's not necessarily against private property or free enterprise or becoming wealthy. These prerogatives are entirely can be accommodated within this kind of left ethno-nationalism. But this is a concept that clearly our antagonists have not wanted us to have, particularly with their ascendance to greater than ever hegemony beginning around 2008 with the financial crisis, or the financial bailout. That's when their neocon wars, their advocacy of cultural Marxism, and the red capes involved of postmodernity began to intersect with them, because they were the elites and the attention began to turn towards them. So they had to double down and rethink, how do we blow back? How do we do damage control? Well, we blame, Paul Gottfried and David Horowitz, they put out this idea that the left is to blame, this characterology of the left. And they market that through the likes of Mike Enoch and TRS and Rams Paul and whomever. And failing that, they get them to say, "Oh, the left-right distinction is that's phony. That's obsolete.
Yeah.
Let's do third." They don't want they say, "Oh, it's all about the left is all about equality." Well, no, the left is about unionization. It couldn't be about equality for the very reason that they cite. It's like this is an impossible notion. It's an absurd notion. Um, so they don't want us to have this concept of unionization, and but if we do, but where we do begin to promote it, it's got the wonderful advantage that um, it doesn't require any elaborate psychological adherence. Uh, and it can accommodate many nuances of ideological outlook, uh, different kind of religious flavors, and but it's about our people, and it structures accountability to our people, and it provides the incentives, which James SDFU says. I'm not seeing. Well, I am seeing it, and it provides incentives for our people, um, where they are more individually motivated. They can still join in, and uh, it structures accountability, and therefore correctivity, and therefore homeostasis, autonomy, the sovereignty that we look for. So we're not just reacting. Uh, and as accountable, we can also coordinate with other peoples and secure that our ethnic genetic interests are established, that we know that our people are going to be maintained in numbers and quality. Uh, we also are not likely to react in destructive ways, whether to ourselves or to others. Uh, our interests are structured, they're in place. Um, Again, they want us to identify as now this characterology that's being promoted since about 2008 of the left as the enemy, and the revamped paleoconservatism, which was the alternative right, now the dissident right, uh, with Nick Fuentes and whomever. Um, it's making the claim that the left doesn't deal with reality, it doesn't deal with nature, it doesn't deal with truth, uh, and that our identity is all about those things. Um, and that the left, is in violation of all that, and only cares about narrative. Well, that's the misrepresentation of postmodern concepts in the big business of selling talk, which is academia, markedly kosher academia, and their liberal minions and their undergraduate students that they're engaged with in perpetuity. Um, of course, again, they're skilled with their Manichaean trickery at misrepresenting these ideas that we need, and even getting, like a virus, getting us to attack the very underlying ideas that we need of organization and homeostasis. So that they want us to say that they would try to say to someone like me, "Oh, you're a left ethno-nationalist. You're not dealing with reality. You're not dealing with nature. You're not dealing with truth." Not true. What I'm doing is what Aristotle would do, I believe, in this situation. That he is centering the worldview on our group interests and coalitions of groups, of kindred groups, and saying that these relative interests are what come first, and that forms the calibration, whereas the truth inquiries are the feedback. We want to be consonant with nature, not beholden to natural fallacy. We want to be, we have to take the truth into account. we Facts, of course, matter, but having said all that, we maintain that we have always at least a modicum of agency to, at very least, determine how the facts count. So we're not denying that objectivity, but we're placing it as an instrument. It's subsumed as an instrument as part of the maintenance of our relative interests as a group. Yeah.
Yeah.
There's Gilbert Salgado there in the chat. It's interesting. I've called attention to the fact before that he's using Mo Berg as his avatar. Mo Berg was a baseball player and also a scholar and a spy for the United States government during World War II. He was Jewish, and he, while he was a baseball player, not a very good one, but good enough to be a professional baseball player. When the American baseball teams were sent touring Japan before World War II, he was taking reconnaissance photos. He was studying all his languages. He spoke like 7 languages. He was brilliant in all these kinds of subjects. Knew physics well enough to talk to Werner Heisenberg, and was sent to meet with Werner Heisenberg and find out if he knew enough to build a nuclear bomb. And was given a gun to shoot him if he did. Determined, that he did not know, because he went for a walk with Heisenberg after a lecture, I think in Switzerland. Anyway, the connection is that my older siblings went to their kindergarten teacher was Moberg's sister, Ethelberg. And I knew her too because my mother became friends with her, was buying antiques from her, and she lived in this part of Newark, New Jersey, which wound up becoming totally black. It was like it was such a sad thing to see at the end of her life. The place was just a nightmare. Um, anyway, that's so. When I would go home to my parents' house, I would sleep on the bed, which was once Moberg's bed. And we had several really amazing antiques, including Habsburg's chairs. Well, we're not a rich family, but we had a chair from the Habsburg Empire, with a big carved wooden boar's head on the back.
Hmm.
Uh, so it was interesting to me that Gilbert was using Moberg's avatar. He died pretty much an unsung hero too. I think he was poor at the end of his life. Moberg. He lived with Ethel toward the end. Um, yeah, but anyway, this war. Coming back to the war, definitely, it's not the thing to do to heed Zelensky's call to step up the war effort against Putin.
Hmm.
Uh, and I do believe that, but I do believe that Newland and company were overly provocative, and not that that gives Putin an excuse, but they certainly they were overly provocative to the point, including willing to enlist to some extent, apparently, Azov battalion. I mean, their leader was at that infamous meeting where Newland's saying, "Fuck the EU, we're going to install whomever we damn well please as Operation Clean Break." Me and my husband Robert Kagan are among those who say so. Um, so there are ways that could have been avoided, but having said that, um, I've been to Lvov, Ukraine, several times in recent years, and while Poznan, Poland is very nice, Lvov was even much better. Wonderful city, as cities go. So, I mean, which makes it all the more, I don't know what, it makes Putin's case all the more difficult that what he's doing is saving these places, because it was as Lvov has been as ideal as a city can be, as far as I'm concerned. All sorts of lovely cafes and bars and restaurants, very peaceful. People, moseying around and enjoying themselves. Uh, okay, maybe I'm not seeing the broader picture, and if I actually lived there, I would begin to see the warts and the moles in the situation. I actually, when I was in Lvov, um, there's a bar there. I don't know if it's called Bandera, but it's kind of like dedicated to Bandera, and you're probably familiar with Bandera.
Somewhat.
Yeah. So there's a bar there. They go in and they maybe say something like, before you go in this particular bar, I went in with a couple of friends who were lady friends who are living in Russia, older ladies. They make you swear that that you don't like Russia, or you're against Russia or something like that, and then okay, you can go in. But they have a picture of Bandera over the door, and yeah, I'm, I'm not entirely comfortable with that, of course. I mean, it's fine being a nationalist, but this is something again when you have a guy who presided over units that were literally massacring a whole village of Polish men, women, and children. Now you won't hear that from the kosher media. You only hear about how he was killing Jewish people, which he did too. But so I would like to think that there's a better way he could have done that. But he was apparently concerned that after the war, the Poles would try to reclaim Lvov, which they probably would try to do. And so this was his way of heading off the problem. And yeah. Sorry. So he was Bandera was in cahoots with the Nazis, and that's what you get. He's very well. So that's another extreme. I think though that there are ways, and when you get down to the common folk, there are ways to work these things out. Where Lvov could have been a shared situation between Poles and Ukrainians. I mean, look at the way the Poles are treating Ukrainians now. I don't hate Ukrainians.
No.
So I don't think that it had to come to this massacre in order for Lvov to be even controlled by Ukrainians. And you talk to Polish people now. I talk to Polish people in Zamość, which is the next major city west of Lvov, in Poland, which, by the way, Hitler wanted to make Himmlerstadt the eastern capital of the Third Reich. Anyway, I talked to people there, and they said, what do you think of Lvov being Ukrainian, even though it had been a Polish city, and Stalin, when he shifted the borders, moved the Polish population from there mostly to what was then Breslau and is now Wrocław. No, it's good. It's good. If that's what keeps the peace, that keeps the peace. And I thought that was a really good charitable attitude, because the truth is that it was a huge loss for Poland. It's a really beautiful city, and I don't think everything, but Poles built it to a large extent. The Austro-Hungarian Empire had a lot to do with it as well, but it was a big loss for Poland. This is maybe people, Germans might not understand when they are disappointed about the loss of Breslau or Danzig, that Poles were losing places in the east as well. But that's the amazing thing. It's like such a beautiful and advanced city in terms of just everything that any of us might want to have was there in Lvov, and apparently in Kiev too. You see some of the videos of what's Johnny, this Oriental American guy who's living there. It's you would never think that they would be in danger of being destroyed. Who would want to destroy it?
Yeah.
So David Duke and Sweden and Mark Collette's favorite book.
Yeah.
You want to, can he be serious? Can Mark Collette be serious when he says this is his favorite book?
What book did you mean?
Mark Collette was asked if what are his three favorite books, and he said Mein Kampf, David Duke's My Awakening, and I think the um, George Lincoln Rockwell book.
Okay.
I don't think that this is a wise. Even if he believes that, I don't think it's wise for him to announce that before the world if he wants to gain popular and sane adherence.
Yeah.
I mean, even Rams Paul, he has his girlfriend, nice lady. Is it Sasha? Yeah, Sasha, who was saying that she sort of came into this consciousness through Mark Collette largely, or that's where she came from, like kind of like more alt light stuff into a bit more radical, and it just goes to show it's important. And here you got Rams Paul saying, "Oh, they're gonna call everybody Nazis," and it's like it's so he's in this tone of voice like it's so like it's not
sounds like him.
it, like it's not serious problem, because a lot of these people, academic agent is guilty of this too. He's got this thing that he calls the boomer truth regime. And he says, and the biggest thing to undo of it is the idea that its position that Nazism is the greatest evil. Well, that's not the most important project. And furthermore, coming back to Rams Paul, there are true believers in white nationalism, or so-called white nationalism. There are true believers in Hitler and Hitler redemptionism, and they're a problem. The association with us is a huge problem. It's divide and conquer. It's radioactive. There's a reason why our enemies want that association. It's not going to, it's disaster. So it's not something that Rams Paul should be trivializing. And it's not something, and nor should academic agent, who's an Iranian guy, by the way, nor should he be trying to say that, like he's doing something new by trying to minimize the destructiveness of Hitler. This is what right wingers in America and so on have been trying to do for years. This is what T.T. Metzger was wisely fighting against in like denouncing the right wing and pursuing a new direction, because it's not. This has been going on for decades, and it's not something. Yes, the boomers who are involved with the mainstream, i.e., kosher media, yeah, to them, in that media, yes, the Nazis are the great demon, but in the media of that's presenting itself to white nationalism, it's I almost feel uncomfortable and guilty for criticizing Hitler. Can you imagine? Really?
Mm-hmm.
And for saying that, yes, I think something like the Holocaust is pretty much an accurate story.
Yeah.
And
it's a political correctness inside the nationalist movement.
Exactly.
It's what, yeah.
And it's very, very frustrating, because it's not necessary. I'm not calling upon anybody, Germans or anybody else, to feel guilty or to be penalized for things that happened generations before. They don't really understand a thing that, or that some of them just don't understand that they don't need this. It's not
Yeah.
like it's not like a linchpin. It's not like a magic key that if you somehow prove this stuff wasn't true, which you'll never do, that it's going to free us of guilt and persecution. Um, there are really other ways to handle it, and you know, your people need to listen more to your late friend, the great scholar, Dr. Christian Lintner.
Yeah.
I already I almost got choked up and started to cry thinking about his passing. You know.
Yeah. Yeah. He was.
Really good man, and
Yeah.
and brilliant.
Yeah. Yeah. Sad that he died.
I asked him. I said, "You're not against Germans, are you?" And he said, "I am German." So it just perfect.
Yeah.
Uh, not to not at all against not against Germans, not against German nationalism. Want the best for them in Germany, in diaspora. No problem. So the nicest people that I meet when I'm in my travels, the most intelligent, funny, are Germans. I'm not against Germans, but so it's not that.
Yeah.
Uh,
It's crazy how you, if you say you're against National Socialism and these ideas, you're anti-German or you're anti-white, according
yeah,
to a
they
lot of
try
people
to
in
say
this movement. It's crazy.
a lot of them. They try to say that, and it's very frustrating. And I'm
Yeah.
in an awkward position going by I go by my mother's maiden name, a Polish
Yeah.
name, so they think, oh, you're just saying that because you're Polish, and then I
Yeah,
get called a.
but I'm saying it as a Swede. I mean,
Well,
also,
that's a big help.
yeah,
That's
I
a
mean,
a part of why I wanted to drag you into this because it's like with me they're just going to say, oh, you're of course you're going to say that you're Polish,
yeah,
and I try to explain to them, really that's my mother's maiden name. My father was Italian, of Italian extraction. Does that make it any better? But no, it wouldn't. So
yeah. But there's German nationalists agreeing with us also. So that it's not, you know,
I'm sure there are.
yeah,
I'm sure that most Germans, you know, would are normal
yeah,
and good people and not at the other extreme of liberals either, and who would agree with us that and these are people that we have to connect with. You know?
yeah, yeah. That's, but I think it's there is more pro-Hitler white nationalist peoples like in America and in other countries than Germany. Really, so
Really? Wow. Yeah. Well,
yeah,
it's you can understand it. It's like that. It's that's the market of these disingenuous right wingers like David Duke and Mark Collette. What market and what money that they come from is going to come from the vast reactionary American audience. These white. It's not, and it's not that it's not understandable. These white kids are beleaguered and tortured by the liberalism and the political correctness, and I can understand, especially if you're say a German American, you know, it would be very hard to resist not pushing straight back and saying no. I can see now that Hitler was right, so they would do that, and unfortunately, there's going to be people who will pander to them, and they're circulating this false currency. And the fact is that white American demographics, it's mostly German. That's the biggest group by far.
Yeah, I have read that over half of the white population in America are German or partly German ancestry, as I understand
Right.
it.
Well, the 1990, I remember the 1990 census, and in terms of white proportions, shouldn't be too much different now. It was, I think, 86 million German, 36 million Irish. It's more Irish in America than there are in Ireland. 32 million English, 32 million African, then about 16 million, then about 21 million Hispanic, 16 million Italian, 12 million Polish, um, 8 million Oriental, like 2 or 3 million Jewish, was the way they broke it down. So it's far and away German, so they're going to be susceptible to over sympathy to Nazi Germany uh, to begin with, and then you're going to have people who pander to them, and also the second biggest group, which is Irish, are going to be susceptible as well for their historical antagonism to Britain, but also because they weren't in the path of the Nazi wrath, so that it's not as visceral an aversion to Nazism. So when they're suffering, and these people are suffering, the white kids, they're going to be susceptible to the greatest story never told and shit like that, and they're not going to fact check, this Goodrich guy who's promulgating straight out Goebbels propaganda that you know Poles killed 56 million Germans interwar Germany, which uh, it was a trumped up figure to begin with of 5,600 presented to Hitler, who told Goebbels to make that 10 times the amount and put it in the German press.
Yeah,
That's a complicated issue, though. I don't want to get into that just now, but yeah, basically, there were mean things going back and forth through the centuries between Poles and Germans, back and forth, and revenge was gotten and then some. So uh, I'm satisfied to leave it in history. Uh,
yeah, yeah. I agree. I mean, every country in Europe have done some kind of war crimes and started wars and imperialism and I
yeah,
mean, Germany lost lands and Poland did, and I mean Sweden was an empire too, and we all these wars we lost a lot of our lands, but
oh brother, the Vikings are brutal.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So yeah,
They weren't exactly nice guys. Hopped up on their mushrooms like they were going out and slaughtering each other, slaughtering people for a maiden in Valhalla, all incentivized as they were. But that's it's history. So I mean,
yeah. I mean, yeah. Sometimes it's better to lose some of your country to make peace with others. I mean, not only, I mean, Nazi Germany lost their
Yeah, that's
some,
what I'm saying
you know,
about. That's
Poland
what I
did
said.
that, Sweden did it. We lost Finland and Åland and other places. I'm not hearing Swedish nationalists say we have to take that
That's a good point.
land
Yeah, and
back.
like I said,
And
people aren't hearing that Poles, they lost Lvov, they lost Grodno, they lost Vilnius. They had these places at one time, and now it's gone. And matter of fact, my cousins were moved from these places into further into Poland. Um, I don't. It's certainly lamentable the Germans that were killed where they were
yeah,
when they were killed after the war being moved west. But the sheer shifting of the borders, I'm not. You're not going to have a lot of sympathy from me because most of what was they lost was taken by imperialist acquisition by uh, Frederick the Great's successor, anyway, if not him himself. Um, and the one thing, I mean, that goes with, yeah, most of what they had. Danzig was neutral. Danzig wasn't Polish. You never hear that specified. Um, they had Breslau. They had what's now Wrocław. Uh, uh,
yeah, and I mean, Hitler, he was looking to the past, and Frederick the Great, and I mean,
exactly.
me as a Swedish nationalist, I mean, there was the Swedish Empire. It was big. We had a lot of, Finland, the Baltic states, some of Germany, and as a Swedish nationalist, I'm not looking back in history and says uh, I'm proud of that because I'm not. I don't proud of everything that was in Swedish history. I'm a Swedish ethno-nationalist, and I want a Swedish ethno-state, but I'm not looking at history and feeling proud of
That's because you're normal
yeah,
and good. Yeah, yeah. I mean,
yeah.
I'm
So
I'm not I'm not I'm not proud that from my Italian side. I'm not proud that Julius Caesar went up into France and slaughtered the Gauls and brought all these
yeah,
Gauls slaves into Italy. I'm
yeah,
I'm impressed. Um, I'm proud that he had the skills to do these things, maybe, but not that he did that. I'm unhappy about that. In fact.
yeah. So yeah, that's the difference between
An
people like you
imperialist
and
and
me,
an
and
ethno-nationalist. Yeah, a true
yeah,
ethno-nationalist. We're not supremacists. We're not imperialists. We're
yeah,
on the contrary. I appreciate. I love the other European cultures. I want to go
yeah,
to
me too.
Sweden and see the Swedes there,
Yeah,
Germany and see the Germans
welcome.
there, France and see the French. So Italy and Italy and Spain and Spain, and England and English, so on.
Yeah, I mean, I want to preserve all the European countries and all the cultures and races in the world. Really, I would love to, visit, go to Asian countries, see their culture and traditions and the peoples there. But I want all to
And that could be and the mechanism for homeless, and we have at hand the means for managing this ecology of cultures and people.
yeah,
So it's why it's so important that we talk as normal people, as sane people, and
yeah,
as morally well grounded people. Uh,
exactly. And as I said, I mean, the Swedish Empire. I think it's was not a lost for the Swedish nationalist cause, and I think it would be not a lost for the Russian people and Russian nationalists if they would lose the Russian imperial
I agree.
and many of the peoples that they have conquered in the east. I mean, these Asiatic people, if they had their own ethno state, and you know, I think all of this,
But
the,
look at it this way: in the case of the Russians, they would be triggering less resentment for example, the Japanese wouldn't hate them because they wouldn't be sitting on top of islands that should be Japanese with with gas resources that the Japanese so desperately need that they're having to build nuclear reactors on top of earthquake zones. Um, they could get help from. They would be more secure because they'd be subject to less resentment. They could be enriched by the uh, purchase of their lands and uh, helped with establishing their industry. You could even, I mean, it might even be the case, I don't know, that these northern reaches, uh, northern Russia could be a good place for a nuclear reactor because you're so far from, even if it did have an accident problem, it's so far from human civilization that it wouldn't matter. Maybe. I don't know.
Yeah.
But, uh, you know, they would not have uh, they would not have the hatred that they've generated among the Ukrainians. And believe me, I know some Belarusian nationalists, and uh, there's a hatred of Russians there.
Yeah.
You know, the true Belarusian nationalists. People don't know, but these are a different people.
Yeah, they are
Rus-
not Russians.
They're not Russians.
They are more like Baltic.
More Baltic and
Yeah.
and a different uh, shade of Slavic. Yeah,
Yeah.
they were part of the of Lithuania
Yeah.
in history, and but they were slaughtered by the millions in wars against Russia over the ages, and slaughtered by the millions more than anybody by the Soviets. The Belarusians suffered more than any other European peoples, I should say, um, and and so there's this hatred that they got to deal with when they could be on cooperative, neighborly terms.
Yeah.
So it'll take a long time now, um, but you know what Russia is now is not an ethno state. It's an imperialist kleptocracy.
Yeah.
They're just taking over these places so that they could have the oil reserves and nickel and diamonds and whatever else that they can extract from the ground and sell, rather than having a more limited and reasonable ethno state based on their people uh, and developing the industry that goes along with self-generating autonomy.
Yeah.
The Japanese would help them. I would love to get Kumiko in here for talks. I wish she would talk to us. I don't. I'm doubtful that she will. Um, it was hard. It was hard for me to talk with her for different reasons. The interface was complicated. Um, but she's so smart and so knowledgeable about international relations and political affairs, geopolitical affairs. Um, and I haven't been paying a lot of attention to these things in my life. You know, as an American, you're just like, you know, well, who needs the rest of the world? I'm just gonna sort of live my life, and but eventually it became necessary to know these things, and she would try to spring on me rather liberal positions sometimes, all of a sudden, and um, almost like a Tora Tora attack on on um, on Honolulu or Pearl Harbor. It was like that, or a kamikaze.
Hmm.
She should be able to trust that I can work things out with her in a way that is good for the Japanese without having to be quite so without having to be paranoidally aggressive towards uh, whites, whether in America or in Asia. Um, because I know white Americans, and I know that they don't hate Japanese. They they tend to have like you know a gentle, fond attitude. So I'm sure that there could be uh, large enclaves of Japanese in the Americas that could function well alongside white enclaves. Um, and that we could form a coalition there against those who are antagonistic or don't care about us. We can imagine who. Because the Asians are having a lot of problems with the homies, famously, not surprisingly. Um, and you know, we can tolerate you know really a fair and reasonable amount of liberalism within bounds, as long as our people our genetics are secured and our boundaries and borders are secured. Um, I don't think that you're going to go around asking people their business and for an accounting of you know, the details of their life. Basically, they're innocent until proven guilty. I'm sure that's the way you would be.
Yeah.
Um, but the thing is that I haven't yet been able to get her to subscribe to this left ethno-national point of view. Uh, and she's right to think that these right wingers are not going to be friendly to her, but they are both either bad actors of themselves or being instigated to antagonism against Japanese by the kosher folk when they want to play divide and conquer.
Yeah, that's what they do all the time.
They do.
They want
They do.
to split our folk in all kinds of interests that.
Well, when she was at
that-
Majority Rights, I was trying to work this out with her, and she was interacting. She would not stop interacting with. I told her, don't go to TRS. Don't talk to people like Silver. And Silver's saying is like, yes, we hate you. You better understand that. It's like, no, no, no. I explained to her, no, no, this is not. I lived in America the first 34 years of my life. People don't hate Japanese. They don't go around hating Japanese. And she showed me this paste up of supposedly a bunch of statements from American girls, college girls, saying how happy they were that Tokyo was nuked in World War II, and I could see plainly that it was fake. But the Japanese, they believed this, or some of it was. This was put into the Japanese media as something sincere. I could not only could I tell that it was fake, I could tell that of these dozens of messages in this collage of American soccer girls saying that they were happy that Japan was nuked, that there's probably one, maybe two authors at most, because the syntax, the type of writing was all the same. And I could also surmise, in all likelihood, there's probably demographically, it's probably almost certainly kosher, coming from an Ivy League school, just like a really a kosher Ivy League college girl with a chip on her shoulder after her soccer team lost to a Japanese soccer team or something like this. But the thing is that there's a lack of trust there that these right wingers are trying to foster, because they know that the Japanese, for example, could be among our best allies with their high IQ and their ingenuity and their ethno-nationalism. They would be among our strongest allies against the kosher folks, against their imposed liberalism, where they are imposing liberalism. Now, here, this is all a working hypothesis, and here's where I claim the innocence. It's like when I'm accusing the kosher folks of things, it's like I'm willing to stand corrected if they can, if it's honestly shown in an instance that this particular kosher guy didn't do this, if this is not their intention, if they're okay with what I'm doing. It doesn't matter, because I'm not trying to kill them or exploit them or harm them in any other way, in any way.
No, I want them to have their own ethno state as well and survive and thrive as a people. We only say that we want them to leave us alone, and we can.
Well,
leave them alone.
you're a bit nicer than I am. I would say this. That's fine. What I'm saying is that it's not my problem. I don't want to be a proponent of their ethno state and trigger the offense of people who might be harmed by them. I
see.
I'll say this: it's not my problem. I'm just I'm not trying to kill them or anybody else. That's my position.
Yeah.
Yeah, but these are working hypotheses. I'm not going to be able to wield facts and figures and institutions, whether it's the World Economic Forum or the IMF or whatever, in the way that say a Keith Woods or Joel Davis can. But the working hypotheses are sound, and yes, the kosher folks are number one or two on the radar screen always, but so are our right wingers and liberals, because those are the traitors to our interests. And then you have to look at Islamic terrorism. You have to look at black biopower. You have to look at
Christian Zionists.
You have to look at the Abrahamics. Yes, the Christians, and you have to look at the Chinese. There's other ethnocentrisms which are antagonism, and because look, the Chinese, they will certainly take advantage if you let them. There's no question about it. It's not, you know.
Yeah.
So it's it's an organism has interfaces all around, and the homeostasis is in survey constantly of potential breaches in the borders and the boundaries, and correctivity is keeping track of that. So
Yeah.
well, I don't think that I did as well in this conversation as I did in our talk. Our talk before the live stream was probably better than this, but uh, this wasn't too. The meat is there, the content is there, and we'll get. I'll get better, and you'll get better. Not that you were bad, didn't. Uh, just that I did.
Yeah.
Um, in days to come, I want. Riga was Carl Rangel of South said Riga was the largest city in the Swedish Empire in the 17th century. Riga's a beautiful city. Ever been there?
No, actually no.
Really, 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 really nice.
Yeah, I've heard that.
I don't know where Mirthbearer. I'm sorry that Mirthbearer isn't here today. He'll probably be able to join us next time that we convene. One thing I don't want, if I may encourage you, Hara, is don't worry about us being repetitious for now, because some of the fundamentals we have to get down and get promulgated so that people know, and having always to be new is the feeling of always having to be new is a pathology of modernity. Um, we don't always have to be presenting new information, just as we don't have to be calling upon the revolution of our genetics. We're about reconstructing ourselves. We're about homeostasis. Uh, this is a white postmodern idea. Uh, Heartbreaking. Some of these pictures of these people being killed, these Ukrainian people being killed.
Yeah.
On my Twitter, I have this one. I've been posting this one picture of this mother, and she's like has her face right into the face of her probably dying child, pile of blood beneath its head, and the father standing there. It's just, yeah, Putin, absolutely disgusting.
Yeah, we can only hope that the war will end soon. That
Well, that depends on judgment. I'm really worried when like I said, these Republicans talking about the great heroic Zelensky, and we've got to literally talking about about granting his no-fly zone. Who who wants that? The military-industrial complex? They could, a lot of money to be made, I guess. But, and get their planes into operation and new contracts for them, probably rubbing their hands together.
Mm.
Um, yeah,
Yeah, that's sick.
really bad.
Yeah.
The name escapes me. What's the name of that guy? Oh, I'm trying to remember the Republicans' names. Oh, no, never mind. But I was surprised by that. At least the heads of NATO are talking like they're still talking like they're not going to go along with any no-fly zone, and they're not going to send troops. Though some are saying that Putin is already seeing European and NATO involvement, that the sanctions are a form of war, and that supplying of weaponry is a form of war. I think the counter argument to that is that the Russians and Chinese supplied war to the Vietnamese, the North Vietnamese during the Vietnam War, and it wasn't taken as them being involved directly, them being a belligerent in the war. I'll put the link in one more time so that if anybody wants to join us, they can. Otherwise, maybe we can hang on for another 5 minutes and then adjourn for another few days, reassess what's going on. But yeah, these people who were trying to justify Putin are disgraceful, and even Coach Red Pill in saying that you know, oh, the Russians are winning, and just the disposition that he's taking. I can understand why Ukrainians would hate him. I really do. And how arrogant the West was, and all this.
Mm.
People want to blame. Somebody want to blame Americans. Well, I will defend American people in this regard. They're really, the people are not that bad. They really are not. I don't think that they want to that they're responsible for what the neocons are doing.
No. No, and they cannot. They cannot do anything to stop them either. I guess in the
Now, they can't even control their own borders.
yeah, and this two-party system you have in the United States is very hard to make a difference in.
Yeah, the big money, the lobbies and the corporations, they can, and APAC, they control all the.
Control both parties. Yeah, it doesn't matter which party they vote on and support.
Nope.
It's like this. It's the same kind of lobby groups that are controlling United States, and
Yep.
so I mean, cannot blame the people there.
A little bit, but not for the most part. Um, it's a it's a it's a problem going back to the American way and the American Constitution and its idea, its focus on individual rights and the Locketean idea that groups are a fiction. It, that for his anger with the discrimination of the British aristocracy that didn't let people from beneath, particularly the middle class, have opportunities for education and other advancement. And that's a noble cause, and um, a good idea when you have a homogeneous ethno state. It's very it's understand how people would be very defensive of this idea of their opportunities for all. Uh, but even if America was an ethno state, to not be able to discern patterns and classify them would, for the sake of accountability and pattern maintenance, would probably be destructive, almost certainly. Even if you didn't have a civic nationalism, which you have there, but with civic nationalism, it's really destructive. It's destructive, and especially as weaponized with so-called civil rights and so-called anti-racism. You have then you have a destruction of historical patterns and a destruction of development within the lifespan, even. So it's horrific, and it would take Americans to reject the most founding ideas of the nation. And it's gotten so bad that that's actually happened. Back in 2009, I was fairly alone in criticizing America's constitutional ideas. Now you'll even have Blonde in the Belly of the Beast saying it. You'll have Sam Dixon saying it, but saying it wrong. He says, "Well, the problem is it's based on inequality." No, this is a red cape that we've got to get away from. We should not be defending inequality. That's dumb. The problem is that you prevent it from classifying and discriminating accordingly in a benign way for the sake of accountability. And Saul Alinsky style, the kosher folk weaponized this idea of classifications being an empirical fiction, according to John Locke. Calling it anti-racism, and where's your civil rights? You have a Woolworths, Brown versus the Board of Education. Felix Frankfurter, kosher judge on the Supreme Court, with his law clerks drafting up school integration and call themselves the voices of restraint and forefronting, sorry, perb, but the man that Frankfurter called the dumb Swede, Earl Warren, considered him naive, and because he worried that his activist court would go too far in pushing civil rights and the Brown versus Board of Education school integration. That he would be so caught up, intoxicated by the purity spiral of his innocence and pure objectivity, that he would cause a backlash. It's the only thing that Felix Frankfurter was worried. But the laws were drafted by Felix Furter and his law clerks to weaponize civil rights, to weaponize anti-classification. And an array of other legislation that went along there in the 60s that they would like to, that the right wingers want to blame on hippies, right? Yeah, the hippies did it. I mean, it's the Rumford Fair Housing Act, wherein you can't rent or sell to whomever you like. In 1968, there's another one. And of course, the Immigration and Naturalization Act of 1965, which I guess almost reversed. This was Manuel Sellers and Jacob Javlik's baby. They forefronted the Chavez Goy, Ted Kennedy, but which pretty much reversed the immigration quotas, limiting European immigration. Whatever. Disaster.
Yeah.
So that was 1965. And the hippies would have been... and they want to blame it on the hippies. I don't think so. Aid in attendance. It's good. We're gaining audience. Should stick around for a while. We're saying, I think that Per agrees with me. I'm sure that Per agrees with me when I say that people should not heed Zelensky's call to hot war with Russia. They should not have to begin with. This is not an organic motive that someone truly concerned for the Ukrainian people would espouse. Let alone should America and NATO and Western Europe grant his no-fly zone and so on, and get sucked into, run the risk of getting sucked into an escalating. Yet more catastrophic war.
Yeah, I agree.
And whatever reasons, okay, we'll close up shop soon. Nevertheless, whatever misdeeds that the West is responsible for, the likes of Victoria Nuland and the neocons, etc., or even reactionary right-wingers like the Azovitide are responsible for, does not justify what Putin's doing. So let's adjourn for there. Per, thank you very much for talking. Um,
Yeah, thank you for inviting me to talk, and you raised a lot of interesting points and so on. So it's very
let's let's
interesting.
uh, let's talk again pretty soon, and let's see if we can get Mirth Baron on here. He's an Irish guy living in, I don't know if you like to call that. He's an Irish guy, a guy of Irish extraction living in England. We'll get him on here, and then there's some other friendly voices, some that I've been talking to as well, and we'll try we'll try to build up this DNA nations concept, because the concept, the beautiful thing about one of the beautiful things about unionization too that they failed to mention. The last thing that I'll say is that Carl's not the golden one. No, he's Swedish, but he's not the golden one. The the idea of unionization will liberate us from the reifications of the land of the nation and the political obstructions of the nation. Of course, we're never losing sight that we want to, retake for that we want Sweden to be for the Swedes and so on. But we are informing this idea of unionization, unionizing the Swedes an ethnicity, as a people. Um, we're not going to be, we're no longer going to be obstructed, but we can begin to cultivate our interests directly amongst ourselves, and the Swedes directly with the Swedes. They'll be liberated from these obstructions, and then of course this is not mutually exclusive. I mean, of course you're still helping people who are manning the borders and trying to deal with the political bureaucracy and win office, but we're not stultified right there. We're going to pursue our direction, our autonomy, irrespective, and then come back strongly organized to be able to begin to exercise what should be our prerogatives. Okay, so Parth, thank you very much again, and I look forward to talking to you again soon. I really
Yeah,
appreciate it.
thank
Really
you very
appreciate
much, and take care.
it. Bye for now.
See you later. Bye bye.